Star Trek just confirmed its TOS and Enterprise eras never went away. Star Trek Lower Decks just confirmed that Star Trek Enterprise and Star Trek, the original series, eras never went away, even though the animated comedy is set in the late 24th century of Star Trek: The Next Generation. In its fifth and final season on Paramount+, Star Trek Lower Decks sees the USS Cerritos investigating rifts in space that are gateways to alternate Star Trek timelines. However, in Star Trek Lower Decks Season 5, Episode 5, a navigational computer malfunction forces the Cerritos to dock at the dreaded Starbase 80 for repairs. Although Star Trek, the original series, began the nearly 60-year-old franchise, Star Trek Enterprise was retconned as a prequel predating the 5-year mission of Captain James T. Kirk, William Shatner, by over 100 years. Set in the mid-22nd century, Star Trek Enterprise established that Captain Jonathan Archer, Scott Bakula, was the first captain of the Enterprise, commanding the heretofore unheard of NX-01. Archer's pioneering mission set the stage for key events such as the establishment of Starfleet's Prime Directive and the founding of the United Federation of Planets. Star Trek Lower Decks Season 5 is marching toward the 25th century, but the 22nd century of Star Trek Enterprise and the 23rd century of Star Trek, the original series, are preserved in Starbase 80. The oldest and least desirable space station controlled by the Federation, Starbase 80 was built at some point in the 23rd century and hasn't had an upgrade of its system since the mid-2260s. Hence, Starbase 80 was constructed sometime between Enterprise and TOS, and it's a storehouse of both era's technology and paraphernalia. Starbase 80's personnel like Commander Cassia NOx, Nicole Byer, and Chief Engineer Jean-Luc wear blue jumpsuits just like the cast of Star Trek Enterprise, while Starbase 80 is infested with Perithian bats like the kind Dr. Phlox, John Billingsley, kept in his NX-01 sickbay. Meanwhile, Starbase 80 itself is a relic from the 23rd century, with wall communicators, turbo lifts that use twist handles, and a nearly identical bridge to Captain Kirk's Constitution-class USS Enterprise. Starbase 80 is a dilapidated hodgepodge of Enterprise and TOS, but it's also retro-cool, as Cassia NOx says. Star Trek is constantly creating new series exploring different timelines and even alternate realities, but as a shared universe, Star Trek, the original series, remains the franchise's prime touchstone. Captain Kirk's show and movies created all of the core tropes of Star Trek, and everything that followed has been variations of Kirk's Starship Enterprise and its original 5-year mission. This includes Star Trek Enterprise. But Kirk and Archer now symbolize a bygone era of Star Trek that has grown even more inspirational and feeds nostalgia. Star Trek Voyager's Captain Catherine Janeway, Kate Mulgrew, explained the appeal of the 23rd century when Kirk and his cohorts were a different breed of Starfleet officer. They were a little slower to invoke the Prime Directive and a little quicker to pull their phasers. Captain Archer's crew were even rawer as they took their first steps journeying into a dangerous galaxy filled with enemies. Star Trek Lower Decks' era is more complicated, but also set in a more defined and ordered galaxy compared to what Kirk and Archer faced. Starbase 80 is a throwback to that wilder era of Star Trek. Star Trek has always been a universe where time is fluid, where the past and future often merge into a rich tapestry of narratives. Recently, however, a confirmation from the powers behind Star Trek has sent ripples through the fandom, proving once again that eras from its original series, TOS, and Star Trek Enterprise never truly disappeared. This revelation sheds new light on the franchise's interconnected timelines, reinforcing that the legacy of Captain Kirk, Spock, and Archer is very much alive and always has been. A universe that refuses to let go of its roots from its inception, Star Trek has been about exploration, not just of space, but of time, culture, and identity. The original series TOS, first airing in 1966, introduced us to a future full of potential, led by Captain James T. Kirk, Mr. Spock, and the crew of the starship USS Enterprise. Decades later, Star Trek Enterprise 2001 to 2005 acted as a prequel to the franchise, diving into the early days of the Federation and the adventures of Captain Jonathan Archer and his crew. Despite the various offshoots of the series, such as The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and more recent additions like Discovery and Strange New Worlds, the TOS and Enterprise eras have often been treated as historical landmarks, occasionally referenced but seldom revisited in full. That is, until now. Recent episodes and storylines have made it clear that these earlier periods in Star Trek's timeline are not merely historical footnotes. Instead, they are being actively woven back into the modern-day Star Trek universe, with consequences that ripple across time and space. The Enterprise era, the seeds of Federation. One of the most significant reintegrations of the Enterprise era came with Star Trek: Strange New Worlds, the series that explores the adventures of Captain Christopher Pike, who helmed the USS Enterprise before Kirk. This show serves as a spiritual bridge between the events of Enterprise and TOS, with Pike's command occurring just a few years after Archer's era. Through the character of Pike, fans have seen direct connections to the pre-Federation world explored in Enterprise. From the tensions between Earth and the early Klingon Empire to the fraught relationships between the Andorians and Vulcans, the political landscape Archer navigated continues to influence the Federation of Pike's time. The reappearance of the Enterprise Annex 01 design and references to the pivotal events of that era have kept Archer's legacy alive. It's more than just lip service to fans of the prequel. The Enterprise series established foundational stories that have shaped the Federation's policies, technologies, and ethos in later years. Modern Star Trek shows have frequently revisited these themes, subtly reminding viewers that the struggles and triumphs of Captain Archer and his crew are still relevant to the current Starfleet officers. The original series, Kirk's enduring impact while Enterprise connects to the past, it's the TOS era, centered on Kirk, Spock, and Bones, that has been most persistent in the modern Star Trek narrative. With the debut of Strange New Worlds, the franchise has taken deliberate steps to blend the original 1960s series with contemporary storytelling, keeping the spirit of TOS alive for new audiences. Captain Pike, who was originally introduced in the TOS pilot The Cage, is now a fully fleshed-out character as the series expands on the legacy of Kirk's predecessor. Pike's Enterprise is a direct forerunner to Kirk's, and the continuity between the two captains is highlighted in episodes that emphasize Pike's future knowledge of Kirk's legendary mission. What's remarkable is how seamlessly Strange New Worlds blends the aesthetics and storytelling sensibilities of the original series with modern-day television expectations. The bright colors, the moral dilemmas, and the sense of optimistic exploration are all callbacks to TOS. But rather than feeling dated, these elements are recontextualized to fit within a 21st century understanding of what science fiction can be. Time travel, an endless loop. One of the most fascinating ways Star Trek has maintained the relevance of its older eras is through its recurring use of time travel. Star Trek's time travel episodes have been a hallmark of the franchise, allowing characters from different points in history to meet, interact, and change the course of events. Star Trek: Discovery recently embraced this trope when it sent its crew into the far future. While this move could have disconnected the show from Star Trek's historical timeline, the writers used it as an opportunity to reflect on the franchise's roots. Time travel episodes like Unification 3 bring Spock's legacy into the fold, reminding viewers that the past continues to shape the future. The Enterprise era also explored time travel with a temporal Cold War storyline, an ongoing conflict fought across centuries. While the details of this war were never fully resolved, it laid the groundwork for the complex temporal dynamics we see in modern Star Trek. The acknowledgement that time is malleable has allowed Star Trek to continuously revisit older periods without feeling forced or out of place.